The night began like any other. Hannah Graham, an 18-year-old college student, joined her friends in Charlottesville for dinner and a few drinks. Later, she texted that she wasn't feeling well and eventually wandered off on her own. That was the final time she was seen. Surveillance footage tracked her movements through the city, capturing a man approaching and walking alongside her. What followed would ignite an extensive search and reveal a far more sinister truth than anyone could have imagined. Who was this man, and what happened once the cameras went dark? Hannah Elizabeth Graham was born on February 25, 1996, in Reading, England, to John and Sue Graham. When her family later moved to the United States, they made their home in Charlottesville, Virginia, a close-knit, community-driven town that became central to Hannah's upbringing. From early childhood, she exuded warmth and intelligence. Her endless curiosity, along with her love for nature, books, and thoughtful conversation, set her apart. Those around her were naturally drawn to her bright smile and genuine kindness. She had an effortless way of connecting with people at school. Academically, Hannah excelled, fueled by a deep passion for both science and music. Just as comfortable on the softball field as she was on stage, she thrived in athletics and the arts alike. Her ability to balance demanding studies with creative expression left a lasting impression on her peers. After graduating high school, Hannah attended the University of Virginia, where she pursued anthropology and global studies, fields that reflected her passion for cultural understanding and human connection. College life broadened her horizons, helping her grow into a confident and socially engaged young woman. Her humor, charm, and vibrant personality quickly made her well-loved across campus. On September 12, 2014, a typical Friday night in Charlottesville, Hannah left her apartment to spend the evening with friends. Dressed casually in a black crop top, jeans, and white sneakers, she carried her usual enthusiasm into the night. Like many students, her plans included a pre-party before heading downtown. Throughout the evening, she stayed connected, sending texts to update friends on her location and plans. She stopped by a local cocktail lounge before eventually separating from her friends around midnight. Her plan was to head back to her apartment on her own, something she had done many times before. But this night was different. Surveillance footage later showed Hannah wandering aimlessly, her steps growing unsteady. She appeared to be texting frantically, and at one point told a friend she was lost and couldn't find her way home. Even in downtown Charlottesville, a busy and well-lit area, Hannah seemed disoriented and confused. Investigators would later question whether alcohol or another factor had left her impaired. Over the next hour, she was seen interacting with several people, seemingly looking for guidance though never directly asking for help. Witnesses described her as appearing troubled but not alarmed. It was then that Hannah encountered a man named Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. He offered to walk with her and Hannah agreed. Jesse, 32, was familiar in the community through his work as a hospital orderly and as a youth football coach. On the surface, he appeared to be an ordinary, trustworthy figure. Yet beneath that image lay a troubling past. He had been accused of sexual misconduct multiple times but never convicted, enabling him to remain in the community without serious consequences. Physically, Jesse stood out, tall, broad-shouldered, and instantly recognizable with his dreadlocks. That night, however, his demeanor was calm and seemingly harmless. His approachable appearance, combined with a smooth and calculated manner, allowed him to earn Hannah Graham's trust at a time when she was clearly vulnerable and disoriented. Security cameras later recorded the two walking together through Charlottesville's downtown mall, a place usually alive with chatter, music, and nightlife. But that night carried a different atmosphere. At about 12:45 a.m., surveillance cameras captured Jesse approaching Hannah and starting a conversation. Witnesses later described Hannah as disoriented and possibly under the influence, wandering as if she were struggling to find her way. Seeing her vulnerable state, Jesse offered assistance, with some accounts suggesting he told her he would walk her home to make sure she arrived safely. Although Hannah didn't know him, his calm manner and her own vulnerable situation may have led her to believe he was trustworthy. Cameras soon showed them heading toward Garrett Street together. Their interaction, however, seemed uneasy. Hannah appeared uncomfortable. Investigators believe Jesse relied on a mix of manipulation and persuasion to keep her near him. One witness even recalled seeing him put his arm around her, a gesture that felt more possessive than protective. It was a subtle yet chilling turning point, the moment Hannah's independence began to slip under the control of a stranger. Behind Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr.'s seemingly friendly demeanor lay a past that few truly understood. Born on September 13, 1982, in Richmond, Virginia, he grew up in a working-class African-American family. Though not defined by violence, his early years were marked by financial hardship and quiet emotional strain. On the surface, Jesse's childhood appeared ordinary, but beneath it were struggles often overlooked or minimized. He lived in a modest home with parents who worked to provide stability. While no records of abuse emerged from his youth, the constant weight of economic insecurity shaped his environment. Even so, nothing in those early years stood out as an obvious warning sign of what he would later become during his adolescence. Jesse's behavior began to change during his involvement in sports, which gave him opportunities to build peer connections. Yet he never thrived academically or socially. Former classmates remembered him as distant, hard to read, and somewhat unpredictable. Still, there were no official warnings, interventions, or lasting accusations. Subtle signs of deeper issues may have surfaced during these years, but they slipped by unnoticed. Though not openly violent, his lack of boundaries and accountability created space for troubling behaviors to take root unseen. To those around him, Jesse simply seemed reserved. No one suspected he might one day become dangerous. Meanwhile, on the morning after Hannah's night out, September 13, 2014, concern began to mount. She hadn't come home, and her phone had gone silent. At first, Hannah's friends thought she might have stayed out late or simply overslept. But as morning stretched into afternoon, concern grew sharper. By midday, one worried friend contacted Hannah's mother, Sue, who also tried calling her daughter without success. As the hours passed with no response, the unease turned serious. At 5:30 p.m., just over 24 hours after Hannah was last seen, a missing person report was officially filed with the Charlottesville Police Department. What started as private concern among friends quickly escalated into a full-scale alert. The tone of the situation shifted instantly as police launched an initial investigation. They began interviews and searches, but, at first, found no signs of foul play and no clear indication of Hannah's whereabouts. Authorities classified her disappearance as involuntary but not yet criminal. No immediate clues surfaced, and no physical evidence was recovered. There were no messages from Hannah, no calls for help, but the rising sense of urgency hinted at something far more troubling. In the hours after her last sighting, investigators would begin uncovering clues that pulled them into the city's darkest corners and deep into Jesse Matthews' past. As the hours stretched into days without a single trace of Hannah, her loved one's worry turned into dread. Friends who had once clung to the hope that she was simply out of touch now began to fear the worst. With each passing hour, the concern surrounding her disappearance intensified. When Charlottesville police formally took over the case, one of their first major actions was to examine surveillance footage from the downtown mall, the last place Hannah had been seen. What investigators uncovered changed everything. This wasn't simply a case of Hannah being lost. She could be in real danger. From the very beginning, her parents, John and Sue Graham, became central figures in the search. Sue traveled from England to Charlottesville, determined to do everything possible to bring her daughter back. Together, she and John refused to let Hannah's disappearance be dismissed as just another missing person case. Their constant presence in the media and active cooperation with law enforcement ensured the case stayed in the public spotlight. As police sifted through countless hours of surveillance footage, a crucial lead surfaced. Cameras showed Hannah walking into a dimly lit area of the city alongside a man who matched a specific description: tall, broad-shouldered, and dark-skinned. Though the images were blurry, the figure was distinct enough for investigators to mark him as a person of interest. Through careful review of witness accounts and surrounding activity, police narrowed their focus to a single individual: Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. He was not a stranger to law enforcement. While he had no prior convictions for violent crimes, his history carried troubling shadows. Years earlier, while a student at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, he had been accused of sexual assault. No charges stuck, and he moved on with little consequence. That past, once quietly filed away, now resurfaced under intense scrutiny. On September 19, 2014, just 1 week after Hannah vanished, authorities officially named Jesse Matthew the prime suspect. A warrant was issued for his arrest, but by then he had already fled Charlottesville, sparking a nationwide manhunt. His face and name quickly spread across news outlets and social media, while the FBI joined the search, adding urgency and expanding the investigation. Matthew's sudden disappearance was viewed as a telling sign that darker truths were about to surface as detectives dug deeper into his past. What they began to uncover revealed a far more troubling pattern than anyone expected. Beyond the Liberty University incident, reports of questionable behavior started to emerge. Allegations, abandoned investigations, and unreported encounters that once seemed isolated but now formed a disturbing chain of red flags. Most alarming was the discovery that 5 years earlier, another young woman, Morgan Harrington, had vanished after attending a Metallica concert in Charlottesville. Morgan Harrington was 20 years old when she disappeared in 2009. Her case left cold and unresolved for years. At the time, investigators had no solid suspects, and leads eventually ran dry. But with Jesse Matthew now under scrutiny, detectives reopened Morgan's file, and what they uncovered changed everything. DNA evidence preserved from Morgan's case was compared against Matthew's genetic profile. The results were indisputable. A match. The link between the two young women, both college students, both vanished from Charlottesville, both connected to the same man, was devastating. What had long been a mystery in one case now began to unravel because of another. On September 24, 2014, after several days on the run, Jesse Matthew was finally found and arrested at a campsite in Galveston, Texas. He attempted to escape by crossing several state lines, but coordinated efforts between federal and local authorities ultimately led to his capture. The news struck Charlottesville deeply, impacting Hannah's family, friends, and the wider university community. While his arrest brought a measure of relief, it also confirmed their worst fear. Hannah's story would not end with her safe return. On October 1, 2014, Jesse Matthew was formally charged with abduction and first-degree murder in connection with Hannah Graham's disappearance. He was extradited back to Virginia to face prosecution not only for Hannah's case, but also for charges tied to Morgan Harrington. The revelation that Matthew had likely slipped past accountability for years ignited national outrage. His case became a stark example in conversations about overlooked warnings, institutional shortcomings, and the unsettling ease with which predators can evade the justice system. The arrest of Jesse Matthew Jr. marked a pivotal moment, not only in the search for Hannah Graham, but for the entire city of Charlottesville. What had begun as a missing person case had now exposed a far darker truth. The man in custody wasn't just tied to one tragedy. He could be connected to multiple unsolved crimes. As prosecutors prepared their case, the scope of his actions grew clearer. The evidence mounted quickly. Security footage and DNA firmly tied Matthew to Hannah, while forensic analysis also linked him to the 2009 disappearance and murder of Morgan Harrington. In time, the courtroom would become the setting where these chilling connections converged, revealing the full extent of Jesse Matthew's crimes to Charlottesville and beyond. The impact was profound. Charlottesville, a city long associated with safety, community, and the energy of its student population, suddenly felt shaken to its core. The idea that such a tragedy could unfold in a trusted, familiar place sent shockwaves through the University of Virginia and far beyond. Friends, classmates, professors, and even strangers united in a collective sense of grief and disbelief. Candlelight vigils illuminated the campus. Walls and bulletin boards were covered with posters bearing Hannah's face. The community's response went beyond mourning. They mobilized. For weeks, volunteers scoured fields, forests, and rural roads, chasing even the faintest lead in hopes of a miracle. But on October 18, 2014, just over a month after Hannah vanished, the search ended in heartbreak. A body was discovered in a secluded wooded area of Albemarle County, roughly 10 miles from where she was last seen. The discovery came after days of coordinated efforts involving cadaver dogs and geospatial analysis. The site was deep within private land, overgrown with dense underbrush, and showed no signs of recent human activity. Once located, law enforcement immediately secured the area, beginning a careful forensic process to determine the identity of the remains. At first, there was no official confirmation, but the evidence quickly grew overwhelming. Clothing found at the scene matched what Hannah had worn the night she disappeared, and DNA testing left no doubt. The remains belonged to Hannah Graham. For her family, the confirmation brought crushing grief. The faint hope that she might still be alive was gone, but so too was the relentless uncertainty that had weighed on them since her disappearance. They finally had answers, though they were answers no family should ever have to receive. After the heartbreaking discovery, Jesse Matthew was formally charged with first-degree murder, abduction, and related crimes in connection with Hannah Graham. The legal process stretched on for months, filled with emotional testimony, forensic evidence, and unsettling details. Hannah's parents attended every hearing, resolute in their commitment to see justice through. The prosecution built a formidable case. They presented surveillance footage, eyewitness testimony, and, most importantly, physical evidence linking Matthew directly to Hannah. DNA, fibers, and timelines all fit together. Prosecutors also introduced evidence from Morgan Harrington's case, arguing that Matthew's actions revealed a disturbing, escalating pattern of predatory behavior. Yet, in February 2016, before the trial could reach its dramatic conclusion in court, Jesse Matthew made a decision that would change everything. He chose to plead guilty to the abduction and murder of both Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington. The plea agreement spared the families the anguish of a lengthy trial while guaranteeing that Matthew would never be free again. He received 4 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. The punishment brought justice, though it could never erase the pain. For Hannah's family, and for Morgan's, it was at least a step toward closure. The outcome also underscored how narrowly Matthew had avoided accountability for so long. Without the tireless work of investigators and the strength of grieving families, he might never have been brought to justice at all. His case reignited difficult conversations about institutional responsibility, particularly as it came to light that Matthew had faced accusations of sexual misconduct at both Liberty University and Christopher Newport University. Yet Matthew had managed to evade real consequences for years, slipping through the cracks of a system that failed to act decisively despite clear warning signs of predatory behavior. Hannah's case became a rallying cry for reform. Her parents, Sue and John Graham, used their voices to advocate for stronger campus safety measures, stricter background checks, and better communication between institutions when misconduct allegations arise. They refused to let their daughter's story fade into silence. The legacy of Hannah Graham is one of profound tragedy, but also of resilience and hard-won justice. At the same time, her story forces us to confront deeper questions about trust, about how predators manage to go unnoticed, and about what more can be done to protect one another. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.